The world began with several primordial beings. First came chaos, then Gaia, earth, and finally Eros, love. From Gaia there came Uranus, heaven, who both created the Titans. Uranus disliked his children and locked them deep within the earth. Gaia, sick of having her children imprisoned, made a great sickle that she gave to her son Cronus. Cronus hid until Uranus came to lie with his mother, then leapt out and sliced off his father's genitals, which fell into the sea. Cronus proceeded to release his fellow Titans from prison, and so the Age of the Titans began. Cronus married the Titan Rhea, who gave birth to most of the major gods. Cronus, scared by a prophecy that his children would take his power, imprisoned them as soon as they were born, swallowing them whole. Rhea pleaded to Gaia for help, who, taking pity, hid Zeus after he was born on Mount Ida in Crete. When Cronus came to eat his son, Rhea fed him a stone instead, tricking the Titan. Gaia raised Zeus until he was strong enough to take on his father. The two fought, and upon defeat, Cronus was forced to release Zeus's siblings, starting the war between the gods and the Titans. The war lasted 12 years until Zeus freed the Cyclopses and the 100-headed giants whom Cronus had imprisoned. The Cyclopses gifted Zeus his famous thunderbolt, Poseidon his trident, and Hades a hat of darkness, tipping the balance of battle. The Titans, defeated, were thrown into Tartarus, a prison deep within the underworld, and so started the reign of the gods. Zeus, Poseidon and Hades decided to share power, drawing lots to decide what they would rule over. Zeus got the sky, Poseidon the seas, and Hades the dead. Zeus, king of the gods, ruled from his throne on Mount Olympus, home of the immortals, often using his symbols of the thunderbolt and eagle to warn or encourage mortals. Zeus was responsible for all weather changes, from lightning to snow, depending on his mood. He was also protector of the home and strangers, meaning being a bad host could land you in deep trouble. Zeus married his sister Hera, who birthed the gods Ares and Hephaestus. Zeus was also infamous for his many affairs with other goddesses, from which Athena, Hermes, Apollo, Artemis and Persephone came. He also engaged in many affairs with mortal women, where he created god Dionysus, and many heroes like Perseus and Hercules, most of whom experienced the wrath of a jealous Hera. Poseidon, one of the most powerful gods, ruled the sea, created earthquakes and was the god of horses, much prized in ancient society. He had a palace on Mount Olympus, but an even more magnificent one under the sea, where he spent most of his time. Sailors would have to pray to Poseidon and offer sufficient sacrifice, otherwise risk a painful death at sea. It was very unwise to cross Poseidon, as he held a grudge and could deal out very harsh punishments. In the story of Theseus and the Minotaur, King Minos rules over the island Crete. Every year he sacrificed his best bull to Poseidon. One year he withheld his favourite bull, a huge white animal. Poseidon noticed, but instead of punishing Minos directly, he decided to target his wife. He made her fall in love with the bull, which eventually led to the birth of the half-man, half-bull creature called the Minotaur. Hades, the oldest of the brothers, ruled over the underworld, where the spirits of the dead resided. He shared his throne with his wife, Persephone, and the two were considered to be gods of fertility. The underworld had several guardians and trials, making it difficult for the dead and near impossible for the living to enter. The gates lay past the deadly river Styx. The only way to enter was to get passage from the ferryman, Charon. Charon required payment, and this is the reason why Greek burials included placing coins on the eyes of the deceased. If the soul could not afford to enter, then they were fated to wait on the shores of the Styx forever. Past Charon lay Cerberus, the fabled three-headed dog who guards the gates of the underworld. Ultimately, the soul will reach the three judges of the underworld who decide where it should go. They can choose Elysium, the fields of Asphodel, or Tartarus. Elysium is akin to heaven, a peaceful place where the souls of heroes, demigods, and especially good mortals reside. The Asphodel Meadows is the place for ordinary folk who did not achieve anything notable in life, good or evil. Tartarus is very similar to Hell, and contains not only the Titans, but also criminals who upset the gods, who are tortured for eternity. Hera, sister and wife of Zeus and queen of the gods, was the protector of marriage and women. She was deeply respected in Greek society. She was one of the most vengeful and spiteful gods, punishing women who lay with her husband and any subsequent children. When Leto was pregnant with Apollo and Artemis, Hera stopped her giving birth. She kept Io, another of Zeus's mistresses, as a Hephaestus, and had her guarded by the 100-eyed monster Argos. A famous tale of her jealous vengeance is the story of Hercules. Hercules was an illegitimate child of Zeus. Hera sent serpents to kill the future hero when he was just a child, but the demigod crushed the creatures with his bare hands. She later drove him to madness, making him kill his wife and children, the event that sent him on his 12 labours. Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, the child of Zeus and Metis, was not born in a conventional way. Zeus received an omen that their children would take the throne from him, and so swallowed Metis while she was pregnant. After this, Zeus began to get a terrible headache. He asked a fellow immortal, thought to be Hephaestus, to split his head open with an axe. Athena was then born from his forehead, jumping out in full battle gear while letting out a war cry. Athena had an affinity for heroics, coming to the aid of heroes like Perseus and Hercules. Her favourite was Odysseus, who she worked hard to keep safe so he could return to his homeland. Athena was highly revered in Athens, which was named after her. She competed with Poseidon for the city, both of whom attempted to give it the best gift. Poseidon struck the ground with his trident, making a stream of water rise up. Athena kicked the earth and caused the first olive tree to emerge. The gods deemed Athena victorious, and the city took her name. Athena was also one of the sacred virgin goddesses, and so in her honour, the temple built on the Acropolis in Athens was named the Parthenon, which comes from Parthenos, meaning the virgin. Ares was the bloodthirsty and cruel god of war. Neither god nor mortal particularly liked Ares. The warfare he represents is not honourable nor heroic, but rather the primal rage and bloodshed of the battlefield. Ares had a relationship with the goddess Aphrodite, who was married to the god Hephaestus. The two would sleep together whenever her husband was away. When Hephaestus found out, he made an invisible net and hung it over his bed, and told his wife he was going away. He hid, and as soon as Ares and Aphrodite got into bed together, they were trapped in the net and unable to move. Hephaestus called upon all the gods, inviting them to see the two naked immortals trapped in the net. Laughter burst out everywhere, and it was only due to the intervention of Poseidon that they were released. Aphrodite was the goddess of beauty and love, responsible for sexual attraction in both mortal and immortal alike, often using her powers for her own amusement. Accounts of her birth vary, with her either being born from the genitals of Uranus or as another illegitimate child of Zeus. Aphrodite had a pivotal role in the Trojan War when Prince Paris of Troy was tasked with giving an apple to the fairest goddess, Hera, Athena or Aphrodite, each promising him something different in return. Paris chose Aphrodite, who promised him the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen. Helen was married to the king of Sparta, Menelaus. Aphrodite put Helen under a spell when Paris came to visit Sparta, making her run away with him. King Menelaus and his brother Agamemnon raised a massive army to go take Helen back from Troy, and so started the Trojan War. Goddess of the hunt and twin sister of Apollo, Artemis was a deadly archer and an important member of Olympus. She watched over hunters as well as their prey, ensuring the wilderness was kept in check. Artemis is also prized for her virginity and guarded it jealously. The hunter Actaeon once stumbled upon her naked as she was bathing. Artemis proceeded to change the man into a deer and set his 50 hunting dogs upon him, giving him a painful death for his mistake. Twin brother of Artemis, Apollo was a god of many things. He was a god of archery, but also of light and music, seen with a lyre as much as a bow. Apollo is closely linked with prophecy. He was born on Delos and honoured the island by setting up an oracle there. He later travelled to Mount Parnassus and slew the great snake Pytho. He created a temple where he had achieved the feat, marking the foundations for where the famous Oracle of Delphi would reside. Hermes, the messenger god and patron of thieves. Known as a trickster amongst the gods, he often pulled pranks and stole from his fellow divinities. When he came of age, he assumed the role of messenger, taking a golden rod with him as a mark of his authority. He is often seen with a winged helmet and sandals, which he used to fly around and deliver messages. Demeter, the goddess of farming and watcher of the harvest. The one thing she prized more than anything else was her daughter, Persephone. It happened that Hades was also interested in Persephone, as he had fallen in love with her. One day, while the girl was picking flowers, he opened up the ground and dragged her down to the underworld. Demeter was distraught when she found out and searched for her daughter for 9 days and nights until the sun god Helios revealed her captor's identity. Demeter locked herself indoors for an entire year, refusing to come out until Persephone was returned. Without the goddess of farming, the world went into famine. In order to save the world, Zeus ordered Hades to release Persephone. Hades had fed the girl the food of the dead, a pomegranate, meaning that she was bound to him. After much discussion, Zeus decided that Hades could have Persephone for 3 months of the year, and Demeter could have her for the other 9 months. This explains why the winter months are cold and the plants die, as Demeter waits for her daughter to return. God of smithing, Hephaestus had a difficult start to life. He was born lame, and so his mother Hera decided to throw him off Olympus into the sea to drown. He later returned to the home of the gods and was given Aphrodite as a wife by Hera to reconcile with him. He was a great inventor and fashioned many of the palaces on Olympus. He also fashioned the equipment of many heroes such as Achilles, who he created armour and a magnificent shield for. God of wine and parties, Dionysus was perhaps the most fun of the Olympians. Frenzied women called Maenads and half-goat men called satyrs followed him. He had a huge cult following in Greece, where his followers would participate in mass drinking and the orgies his mythological companions were so well known for. The Greek gods represent humanity at its best and worst. From the violent and destructive Ares to the beautiful and seductive Aphrodite, Greek mythology demonstrates the epic power struggle between parents and children in an endless quest to gain control over the world. Tales passed down from each generation, showing them to be some of the most influential deities in human history, that continue to have a significant impact to this day.
Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and for exclusive rewards check out our Patreon page.
The world enters a state where demons are creating chaos and gods plotting against each other, until we meet Heron, a simple poor miner who becomes humanity and God's breath of hope. He finds out about his identity and awakens his true power, transforming into a demigod. Heron is a strong-willed young man who works as an extremely underpaid miner of ore, mostly because he and his mother are mistreated by the village he lives in. He gets paid less and less every day for his work despite not having done anything wrong except being a child of an unmarried woman, Electra. He's kind and helps people out naturally, but instead of a thank you, he gets insulted. He scrapes by one day when demons are closing in on the village to convert the villagers into demons. People start running for their lives when they see an Amazonian woman named Alexia running in with her squad. Heron hears the racket and goes to see. Alexia asks him if he's seen any demons passing by and dashes off when Heron says no. They hear a groan from something, and Heron and another man go to check it out thinking it could be a demon. But they find an old drunk man he knows very well, Elias, who just broke his leg when he needed it the most. Heron takes Elias to his mother to aid him, while he gets some water for the drunk old man. While doing it, he sees a woman in a fountain and goes to check if she needs help. He gets there and picks her up, just to witness her innards spill into the water. He gets scared and lets her go and gets faced by a demon for the first time. The demon tries to drown him in the fountain, but he manages to kick it off and fights it. The demon knocks him with a pillar, and he goes flying. Alexia quickly appears and stabs the demon, but it doesn't die, it simply enrages it and fights her back. It overpowers her and swings her into the structure. Heron wakes up and fights the demon with his fire torch, knocking it into the water. However, despite the pain, the demon still manages to get up and escape. As people are starting to pack up to leave the markets, Alexia finds a suspicious man and corners him. She arrests him and ties him up on a pillar in the middle of the village. She tells the people about the demons and how they can disguise themselves as people. Heron and his mom take Elias back to their home. There, Elias tells Heron about how the demons came to be after the Titans, where a man found the remains of a Titan washed ashore and ate its flesh to gain its favor, and inherit a bident he can throw and retract from anywhere. This man went on and created a cult of demons and now guns to convert everyone he meets or kill them. Soon, Alexia goes back to Heron to tell him about a map she found with the directions to a labyrinth in Melodone, where the Titans' remains are still there. She asks Heron to join her squad and fight to protect the village, but he refuses because he still resents all the mistreatment he got from the same people. He hurries home and packs up their belongings to run away from the demons in the village with his mother. But Electra stops him and asks him to reconsider. Some men come to their home to test if his mother is a demon by burning her, but Heron fights them. When Electra sees his son being pummeled, she stops them and burns herself, proving that she's not a demon and saving her son. Heron gets even angrier at the people and the world for his predicament and the lack of strength to do anything to help it. Elias comes to him and tells him to go mine a special ore at the top of the mountain, so that he can use it to make him a powerful sword. Heron makes his way to the mountain but falls asleep after taking some rest while climbing. He wakes up from a dream about his mother as a queen who gave birth to 2 boys of different fathers. He continues his journey and reaches the top. He mines the ore as instructed by Elias and returns home with it. While Elias is still making the sword, Heron asks about a seal he saw in his dream and asks Elias. The old man explains to him about his birth in Corinth and how the dream came to him due to the gods of dreams. After a while, he goes to confront his mother about his dream. Electra finally admits to being a former queen of Corinth, and how it came to be she ended up poor and beaten down. She tells Heron about his father, Zeus, and how he's the one who helped them take shelter in the village for protection from Hera, Zeus' wife. Heron asks about his twin brother who's believed to be dead, and finally finds out that Elias is Zeus. He goes outside to confront Elias but doesn't find him there. He only finds the sword which when he touches, it glows a bright blue. He rejects it and throws it away. Elias soon appears to Heron while he washes his face, and he reveals his true self as Zeus. But Heron tells him to go away and never return. Alexia comes running right after, being chased by a 3-headed dog, Cerberus, as the demons manage to close in on the village. They both run for their lives. Heron searches for his mother who is in the village, also looking for him, but he doesn't find her. He and Alexia continue to run away, but Cerberus catches up to them and attacks Heron. They fight it off. Alexia manages to wound one of the heads, which slows it down, allowing them to run further until they reach the gates of the village. They inform the commander of Alexia's squad about a mine tunnel that Heron has been making for years. They could crawl through it and get away from the demons. Despite refusing to listen to the illegitimate guy, the man rallies up the villagers and leads them to the tunnel. As Heron runs around the village calling out for his mom, a demon on a sphinx at a far distance in the forest throws a spear at him, but Zeus steps in and telepathically alerts Heron about it. Heron dodges it but gets cut when the demon retrieves it. Zeus tells him to run, but Heron shoots an arrow at the demon. The demon shoots back his spear and flies down to the place to attack him at close range. He keeps attacking Heron, but Heron can dodge the attacks with the help of Zeus. The demon follows him as he keeps attacking him. Heron sets oil on fire to defend himself and get away from the demons. He gets outside and looks for his mother but still can't find her. He finally hides behind a tree when the demons continue coming with Cerberus, while their leader meets the villagers and asks for Alexia, who was hiding. He introduces himself as Seraphim and kills one man in the group because he's a noble, to feed his hatred for his uncle who killed his adoptive mother. Seraphim asks his men to look for Alexia by her scent. He then meets Electra, who is hiding. Heron comes running as Seraphim tries to kill Electra. He tries to protect her, but Seraphim punches him. He tries to fight but gets beat up. His mother tries to crawl to him laying on the ground, but Seraphim throws his spear into the air and it falls, stabbing Electra. Heron shouts in tears after watching his mother's last breath and is taken away. Elias mourns the death of Electra, and when Alexia comes, he tells her that the demons have taken Heron away. After she leaves, Heron finally sees his mother in his dreams before she crosses over into the underworld. She tells him to be strong and be himself while he's in a cage guarded by Cerberus with other men. They all get transported by Seraphim's men. They reach their destination and get off their cages to walk like prisoners, being whipped by snappers if they ever talk. They get taken to ships that will transport them to their new home if they ever get there. They enter the ships and start rowing as they leave the place along with other captives, 2 of whom Heron secretly talks to, Kofi and Evios. He comes up with a plan to escape. When the Demi-gods come in, Evios and Kofi cause a ruckus as they steal keys, this being a specialty for Evios, a thief. When the guards aren't looking, they unlock their cuffs and unshackle themselves free and fight the guards. They help the other captives free themselves, and they take over the ship and turn it around. Seraphim appears as they get some hope that they have succeeded. He gets onto the ship and reveals the sword that Elias made for Heron. Hera had sent him to get it where Heron had thrown it so that he can kill him, retrieve the cauldron of darkness, and kill Zeus. He approaches the men on the ship. Heron doesn't hesitate. He charges instantly at Seraphim. But when Zeus sees this and sees that his son isn't ready, he strikes down the ship with lightning, stopping the ensuing fight. When Seraphim gets up, he tries to attack Heron again, but Zeus doesn't let him. He strikes the sea multiple times, causing large currents which separate the two men and destroy the ship. Heron is finally saved from Seraphim. He gets out of the water and Elias appears, asking Heron to help him settle this mess. Heron refuses to help, but when Elias says that he could help him kill Seraphim, he agrees. Elias tells Alexia, Kofi and Evios to go to Melodone to get the Titan's remains and burn them, while he takes Heron to Olympus. He calls out a griffin and gives it to Heron. He transforms into an eagle and leads the way. Naturally, the gods reject Zeus' billionth illegitimate child. He simply doesn't know how to stop having them. But Hermes goes to meet him as his half-brother. Apollo and Artemis follow behind as they are Zeus' other illegitimate children and relate to him. Hera soon appears enraged by Zeus' actions of bringing a mortal into their realm. Zeus apologizes for his wrongdoings of being unfaithful to her and promises to change. Now, where have we heard this before? He asks for her forgiveness, and she accepts if he kills Heron, but Zeus can't have it. She and all the other gods, including Hermes who didn't particularly want to, leave the place and go to the underworld where Hades accepts them to take shelter, but ultimately stays out of the matter. Zeus takes Heron to practice fighting and getting his divine power. He pits him against one of Hephaestus' automatons. He tries his best to stand up to it, but every time, it sends him flying with no scratch from him. Zeus comes and tells him to stop fighting with anger and calm down, but he fails. He can't be calm. He doesn't know calm. All he knows is anger, and it fuels him to fight. But unfortunately, in this case, it's proving to be futile. The next day, he asks why Zeus allows Seraphim to live, and Zeus reveals to him that Seraphim is his twin half-brother, and that Electra wouldn't want him to die. Heron gaps to the unbelievable news from his father. Nonetheless, he continues his training and is finally able to calmly observe his opponent, and finds a weak point and stabs it. He defeats the automaton, and Zeus commends him. After Hermes informs Zeus about the other gods in the underworld, Heron gets a call from the Fates. Zeus takes him to see the Fates, and he waits outside while Heron goes inside alone. He gets into a room with strings of fate and meets the three sisters who want to help him. He touches his life string and sees his whole past from when he was born up to now. The Fates tell him about a crossroads that he's coming to. When he touches it, he sees his friends in trouble at Melodone. He asks if they'll die, but the Fates don't answer him. He rushes outside to try and go back to help them, despite Zeus saying he's not ready yet. He arrives at the Fields of the Dead at the Labyrinth of Melodone, where he saves his friends from a minotaur guarding the place. They all head inside and navigate the labyrinth. They reach the place where the Titan's remains should be, but they don't find them. Seraphim and his demons appear and greet them. And for the first time, Heron and Seraphim meet as brothers. Seraphim asks him to join the demons to take down the gods together, as they are the reason they lost their mother. He gives him an ultimatum to be with him or against him. Heron goes against him and gets attacked instantly. The group runs away from the demons when the fight ensues. Seraphim dispatches his spear, which causes the place to crash in and allows the group to escape while closing Seraphim and his demons in. They get on the griffin and head to Olympus, while Zeus and Heron are still watching what's happening on the sea. Hermes appears to want to give Zeus a message from Hera. When he gets closer, Hermes stabs him in the neck, but the real Hermes comes and kicks the other one, who reveals herself to be Hera. She leaves while Zeus falls to the ground, bleeding to death. Zeus finally manages to stop his bleeding before he dies and wakes up to breathe. Poseidon comes carrying Apollo, who was attacked by Ares. He tells them that Hera has the cauldron, and they need to find it to send the Titans back to sleep. Heron offers to help look for it, and they commence their plan and prepare to battle. Apollo gives Heron a bow and some arrows to protect himself, and right then, when everyone is prepared, the Titans march up to Olympus to face the gods. Olympus attacks first, but Hera reflects their attacks back. They keep attacking as the Titans alongside Hera attack back. Heron's group is sent to look for the cauldron on Earth. After searching and searching to no avail, Heron finally realizes that the cauldron is in the sky. He flies there and finds the cauldron held up by Hera's powers. He shoots the crows and the cauldron falls and catches it, despite being chased by Seraphim. He meets Seraphim, and they start their own fight for the cauldron. Seraphim shoots Heron with his spear and causes his griffin to fall to the ground. But he hangs onto the Sphinx, but Seraphim lets him go and takes the cauldron for himself. Seraphim starts to think that he rules the world. He flies above everything and the chaos that's happening. But Kofi hits the cauldron into Heron's hands and jumps on him. He tries to grab him but gets thrown off. He gets caught by the griffin. Alexia jumps and cuts the Sphinx below, making it collapse on the ground. Seraphim gets up and tries to attack her, but Heron appears from up top and jumps on him. Seraphim throws his spear at him, but he dodges it. He charges at him and punches him down. He continues to punch him as memories flood his mind, and he cries for his dead father and mother. Seraphim finally blocks the punches and stabs Heron in the face and throws him off to the side. He grabs him by the neck and tries to stab him with his spear, but Heron stops it, not wanting to get wounded. He remembers Zeus telling him to keep calm. He calms down and lets the spear stabs him. He pushes it through to stab Seraphim. Seraphim removes it and Heron turns to face him. He opens his eyes, they glow brightly, and he summons lightning to strike Seraphim and kill him. A giant appears from behind him and tries to squash him, but he spots the cauldron and carries Seraphim there to seal it with his brother's soul. The Titan's souls get retracted into the cauldron and they go back to the darkness, saving the world. Heron wakes up the next morning and is greeted by his half-brothers who welcome him properly into the family. Watch this next video. See you on the next one.
The demigods are each and all the direct offspring of Queen Marika. There was Godwyn, Morgoth, Moog, Redan, Rykard, Rani, Mikola, and Melania, Blade of Mikola. Melania, Blade of Mikola. Melania, Blade of Mikola. And Melania, not again. All of these demigods had fallen from grace by the time the shattering occurred. But in this video, I want to mostly talk about the origins of these characters, who these demigods were before the fall. And some of these demigods fell a long way indeed. Before he became this unsightly mess, Godwyn the Golden was quite the heroic figure. He was born of the promising union between Lord Godfrey and Queen Marika, and he achieved great renown for his bravery in one of their wars at least, the War of the Ancient Dragons. This war began when Gransax, a great ancient dragon, rained calamity down upon Leyndell, marking the only time in historical record that Leyndell's walls had fallen. It's not clear why Gransax first attacked, but fortifying themselves against lightning, the Knights of the Erd Tree weathered his assault and Gransax was defeated. However, this was only the beginning, and a bitter war against the ancient dragons was to follow. During this war, the Erd Tree Sentinels had an epiphany that the only way to truly protect the Erd Tree was to become dragons themselves. And so, despoiling the corpses of their foes, the grotesque sentinels served the Erd Tree, but fought with the claws of the enemy instead. In the end, the ancient dragons were routed once again. In a graveyard of swords by the Stormcaller Church, the end of the war is commemorated. Here, we learn that during battle, Godwyn the Golden defeated Fortisax, called the mightiest dragon of them all. However, he did not kill Fortisax. Instead, he befriended him. And it was in this act that the powers of the ancient dragons truly became a part of Leyndell. After all, only those loved by dragons can survive the ordeal of cladding their bodies in lightning. So, from an unlikely friendship, an ancient dragon cult was born in the capital city, and the Knights of Leyndell learned to worship the dragons and wield their lightning. Lanciax, sister of Fortisax, even took human form to better commune with the knights. It was officially decided that the worship of the ancient dragons did not conflict with belief in the Erd Tree, and it was all thanks to Godwyn, commander of the dragon's golden lightning, and a true child of the golden lineage. But now, let's talk about Morgoth and Moog, the Omen twins, who were also born of Godfrey and Marika's golden lineage. First, what is an omen? Well, to put it simply, an omen is an accursed child, seen as impure, as they are born with horns on the body and face. When this happens, the correct thing to do, culturally at least, is to cut off the horns of the omen, an act which usually causes them to perish. It's pretty messed up, but some omen do survive this process, and some omen are even given a cleaver, crafted specifically for them and awarded as a tool of war, although these weapons are bestowed with a readiness to take them away. We find one such omen in an Erd Tree camp upon the Altus Plateau. Before you fight it, you might have noticed another omen nearby, writhing in its sleep. It's said that omens see evil spirits in their nightmares, and I think this omen is dreaming, haunted by the vengeful spirits of its accursed kin. This brings us to the omen killers, who are horrifying butchers of twisted conscience. They wear these horned masks that make a mockery of the omen's nightmares, and these butchers hunt the omen and amputate their horns. The first omen killer was named Rollo, a famous perfumer who had to imbibe a physic to rid himself of emotion so that he could better perform his tasks. Remember, it seems many omen have their horns excised when they're very young. That's definitely disturbing enough to warrant an emotion-killing physic in my book. However, if the omen is born of royalty, then their horns are not cut off, but the omen is kept underground, unbeknownst to anyone, and imprisoned for eternity. By way of example, you would have seen all kinds of omen confined to the sewers beneath Leyndell. But why are omen considered to be accursed in the first place? Some of them are clearly intelligent, so what's inherently wrong with being born with horns and great strength? Well, it's important to remember, I think, that this curse might only really exist in the context of the Golden Order. After all, those afflicted with omen horns are not able to return to the Erd Tree for rebirth, and are said to be born outside of its grace. But why does the Golden Order disavow the omen, then? Well, it's hard to say for sure, but my working theory is that it's to do with the Crucible. According to this ancient incantation, horns were once an aspect of the Erd Tree's primordial crucible, where all life was once blended together. And with the exception of a couple of crucible nights in and around Leyndell, we know that the Golden Order has started to distance itself from most things that touch upon the crucible. While things like horns, knots, feathers, and scales once grew on the human body and were considered signifiers of the divine, now they are disdained as impurities as civilization has advanced. We learn this from the knot, scale, and feather talismans, all of which are guarded by omen, or dropped by omen killers, no less. Unfortunately for the Order of the Erd Tree, these once divine impurities seem to crop up in some births, whether they like it or not. Almost like it's a genetic trait, as if it touches upon the crucible at the root of the Erd Tree. And so you have to ask, is it really a curse to be born as a graceless omen? Well, as with most curses in these games, I think that depends on your perspective. In any case, Mohg and Morgoth were omen royalty, and thus they were born into a wretched mire far below the earth, horns and all. Here they were kept under the strictest confinement. Each of them were bound with charmed shackles that were covered in roots or thorns and bathed in golden magic. It seems very few people were supposed to know that they even existed. Morgoth, for his part, renounced and despised his accursed omen blood, but his brother Mohg embraced it. Deep underground, Mohg stood before an outer god, a being called the Formless Mother, who craves wounds, a being capable of bestowing power upon accursed blood. In this moment, Mohg's accursed blood erupted with fire, and he became besotted with the defilement that he was born into. Here, deep below the earth, he would go on to build a dynasty of blood in reverence of a mother, something it seems he never truly had. As for Morgoth, he was born into the same accursed fate as his twin brother, but despite not being blessed with grace, he loved the Erd Tree all the same, and even took it upon himself to crawl out of the sewers and become the Erd Tree's protector when the Erd Tree needed him most. In the end, he rightfully became the Omen King and Lord of Leyndell. Omen or not, he was, after all, born of Godfrey and Marika's golden lineage. Of course, the marriage between Godfrey and Marika would be ended, and before long, Marika remarried with another man, a champion named Radagon, who Marika calls her other half. He became second Elden Lord and the king consort, but he also brought with him 3 children from a previous marriage that he had had with a Carian queen named Renala. These children were Rani, Rykard, and Radahn, and they all became demigod stepchildren after Radagon's reunion with Queen Marika. Possessed of his father's flaming red hair, Radahn was fond of its heroic implications and considered himself to be born of a great champion. Yet he also looked up to another man, Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, Queen Marika's first husband and the Lord of the Battlefield. But Redan wasn't just the son of Radagon and an aspiring lord of the battlefield, he was also the son of Renala, who was head of the Academy of Raya Lucaria and Queen of Caria. So as a Carian royal, inclined towards sorcery, Redan bent his will towards mastering gravitational magics. Rock sling, gravity well, collapsing stars. These techniques were taught to him in Celia, the town of sorcery, all so he would never have to abandon his beloved but scrawny steed. That said, before long, his powers would be put towards a more cosmic purpose than simply allowing him to ride his own horse. Redan was taught gravitational magic by an alabaster lord, a member of a race of ancients with skin of stone who was said to have risen to life when a meteor struck long ago. And when his lessons were complete, Redan uttered these chilling words.
Thank you for your tutelage. For now, I can challenge the stars.
And, of course, he did conquer the stars, and the very constellations would be halted by his strength. But of course, you kind of have to ask, why? Why was it necessary to conquer the stars in the first place? Well, I have a couple of theories. Theory one is that it was done in self-defense. After all, according to the sword gravestone, Redan was protecting Celia. What's more, gravitational magic has destructive power, and many gravitational beasts are proof of that destructive power. A being named Astel had even come down to the lands between in the past and destroyed a place called the Eternal City. What's more, Celians are descendants of the Eternal, positioned right above the Eternal City underground, so there is an argument to be made for Redan purely defending Celia for some reason here. But it's possible for Redan to have fought in this conflict and to have made the first move as well. So this is theory 2, that Redan conquered the stars as a preventative measure in service to the greater will. According to a set of astrologer items, the night sky cradles fate. There's even a banished sect of people called the Nox, who live deep below the earth in eternal anticipation of the coming age of stars and their lord of night. Long ago, these people invoked the ire of the greater will, so it would make sense that those in service to the greater will might have sought to arrest the stars and put an end to this fate. What's more, Redan was just a huge fanboy of Godfrey, and he seems to have more loyalty to the Erd Tree than to the moon. Finally, the telescope item description says that the fate once writ in the night skies had been fettered by the Golden Order. So surely this is referencing Redan's actions, and it levels the blame at the Golden Order. But putting Redan's motivations aside, it's a fact that the stars were held back, and that this had great consequences for many, especially for the rest of his Carian royal family.
Let me explain. The fate of the Carian royal family is guided by the stars, as is the fate of Lady Rani, first heir in the Carian royal line. But General Redan is the conqueror of the stars, who stood up to the swirling constellations, halting their movement in a smashing victory. And so, if General Redan were defeated, the stars would once again resume their movement, as would Lady Rani's destiny.
Lunar Princess Rani was the daughter of Radagon and Renala, and sister to Redan. Interestingly, if you look at her true body atop the Divine Tower, it looks like she might have also inherited the red hair of Radagon. Cool detail. But unlike her brother, Redan, she quite clearly took after her mother more, who was Renala, head of the Carian royal family. The House of Caria has this storied history, one that seems to go way back to the astrologers. In the Carian Manor, we find one of their treasures, the Sword of Night and Flame. It reads, astrologers who preceded the sorcerers established themselves in mountaintops that nearly touched the sky and considered the fire giants their neighbors. Renala herself was an astrologer, always chasing the stars in her youth. Then she met the full moon, and in time, the astrologer became a queen, establishing the House of Caria as royalty. Caria appears to have a matriarchal hierarchy, with multiple princesses and Carian knights that serve as their retainers. Now, however, there is only one princess, Rani, daughter of Renala. and at the time of her birth she would have been set to inherit quite a lot of power indeed, for the Carian royal family was at its height, and her mother was not only queen, she was also head of the Academy of Raya Lucaria, having bewitched them with the enchanting power of the full moon. Leading the young Rani by the hand, Renala guided her daughter to a meeting with a moon of her own. What Rani beheld was cold, dark, and veiled in occult mystery. A dark moon, a sort of twin to Renala's own full moon. You can even see both of these hanging in the sky if you stargaze from the heights of the Moonlight Plateau. Another who guided Rani was a character called the Snowy Crone, who the young Rani encountered deep in the woods. When you look at Rani, it's actually the likeness of this snow witch that you're seeing, as the doll that now houses Rani's soul was modelled after her, probably as a sign of respect. Clearly Rani looked up to this mysterious woman. She became Rani's secret mentor, and she even knew about the dark moon, teaching the young Rani to fear it as she imparted her cold sorceries. So, what do these moons represent? It's just a theory, but I think the moons kind of act as guides. The lost black moon of Noxtella, for example, was the guide of countless stars. What's more, Rani and Renala were heavily influenced by their moons. Renala's moon bewitched the academy that she became the head of, and Rani's dark moon, for its part, also imparts wisdom and leads a voyage in the Age of Stars ending. They could even be outer gods. And yet, for all of this guidance, Caria and Leonia as a whole have experienced steep decline. Radagon betrayed the House of the Moon. Radahn locked the stars out of motion. The Academy town is flooded to the north. Caria has been ruined in the west, and the stars and moon have gone their separate ways. Nevertheless, Rani, last princess of Caria, remains, carefully setting new plans into motion. Sibling to Rani and Radahn was a man named Rykard, who was lord of the Volcano Manor. There is evidence that Rykard was friendly with his siblings. He conspired with his sister Rani later on, and there's even a portrait of Radahn hung in the Volcano Manor, as well as a portrait of Rykard himself before the fall. Item descriptions mark Rykard as stern, ambitious, heroic, and blasphemous. A part of this blasphemy was opposing the Erd Tree, which actually drew many knights to his banner, for Rykard believed in taking by force, just as the gods did, and clearly many believed that he would usher in a new age. The armor set of the Gelmir Knights reveals to us what were once very loyal soldiers. The crest of red feathers are there to symbolize Rykard's pedigree as Lord Radagon's son, and the emblem upon their chest piece represents a lord who had lofty ambitions. However, as Rykard delved into the ancient secrets of Mount Gelmir, he came across the immortal Great Serpent, an ancient deity that aligned with Rykard's ambitions. And so, Rykard fed himself to the Great Serpent so that he might devour, grow, and live eternally. Alas, this was too much for his knights, and they believed that their master's heroic ambitions had degenerated into mere greed. So they searched desperately for a weapon with which they might halt their lord, and they found it too. The immortal serpent had lived for a long time, and so there was also a weapon to kill it that had been designed long ago as well, a serpent hunter. But it was too late. As the lord lost his dignity, so too did the knights lose their master. Not that it bothered Rykard.
Now we can devour God together.
Next, we need to discuss Melania and Mikola. These two were twins as they were born. No, Rykard, please. Anyway, as you know, Radagon's marriage with Renala did not last. Afterwards, he returned to the Golden Order and became Queen Marika's consort. But what I haven't yet mentioned is that, together, they were blessed with two demigod children, the so-called twin prodigies. Now, in the last lore video, I briefly proposed that these two twins were born after the Shattering, after Radagon and Marika had merged together to become a single god. However, I've since changed my mind. I think Millennia and Miquella were clearly born before the shattering. There's just so much proof that these two twins were a force that were influencing the world long before the shattering took place. Anyway, both of these twins were born afflicted. Specifically in the Japanese text, it's said that their births were vulnerable. Miquella was born afflicted with eternal youth, and Millennia, for her part, was vulnerable to rot. Interestingly, Millennia's scarlet rot is actually an outer god. This outer god, like many others in the game, seems to have an order that is able to be imposed upon the world via an Empyrean vessel, and Millennia was that vessel. And while the scarlet rot is pretty terrible, you can sort of argue that it's got a beauty to it. According to Gowry, the order of rot is resplendent. It's a cycle of death and rebirth, kind of like the lotus flower, which is a flower that blooms anew, beautiful and fresh from mud. I actually have art of this flower hanging in my home. I always love the symbol of it. I actually have lots of art hanging now, and I'm going to talk about all of this artwork that you can buy at the end of the video. Anyway, so Millennia the Empyrean was vulnerable to and afflicted by the scarlet rot. There was said to be no cure to this, and while fire and consecration seemed to be somewhat effective at warding it off, Millennia would slowly lose her physical self to the rot. Interestingly, old legends of the scarlet rot have persisted in the world for generations, and we learn more about the rot god from the Blue Dancer charm. The dancer in blue represents a fairy who, in legend, bestowed a flowing sword upon a blind swordsman. Blade in hand, the swordsman sealed away an ancient god, a god that was rot itself. Specifically, this god was long ago sealed away in the stagnant water that is downstream of the Ainsel River underground. And wherever rot appears, the kindred of rot appear as well. These are pests and servants of the rot. And now, in the current age, these are servants that have been forsaken by Millennia, who is their new goddess. So, this blind swordsman with the flowing curved sword actually went on to become Millennia's mentor. So technically it's him that we have to blame for this goddamn attack. The prosthesis wearer heirloom tells us more. A talisman engraved with a scene from a heroic tale. Though born into the accursed rot, when the young girl encountered her mentor and his flowing blade, she gained wings of unparalleled strength. Millennia's ridiculous attack is called the waterfowl dance, and aesthetically it makes sense that, flowing waters would counter the effects of rot. For just as still waters turn foul, stagnation turns to decay. Thus, warriors must remain ever drifting. And indeed, Millennia does resist the call of the rot. There's a lot of evidence that she's not really a willing vessel, but through sheer will and sense of self, she resists the rot, and only when she is truly pressed in battle will she abandon this will and bloom into the goddess within. Millennia's first bloom was during her fight against Radahn, and releasing her scarlet rot was a last-ditch effort that would forever taint the land of Caelid and cripple Radahn. So whatever she was fighting for in this fight against Radahn, somehow it was worth this terrible act. In general terms, at least, it's clear that Millennia was fighting for her brother. Apart from the times where she relapses into being the goddess of rot, she is known as the Blade of Miquella. She actually goes to great lengths to tell you this. I don't know if you heard. Despite being the toughest boss in From Software history, she's actually fighting for his right to godhood, not her own. In Millennia's own words, her brother Miquella possesses the wisdom, the allure of a god. He is the most fearsome Empyrean of all. For his part, Miquella did a lot to earn his sister's dedication, not the least of which was inspiring her armor and a prosthetic of unalloyed gold. It is not just his sister that loved Miquella, many people did. The Bewitching Branch is an item that you can use to turn enemies into temporary allies, and it reads, "Indeed, he has learned very well how to compel such affection." For his father Radagon, Miquella fashioned and gifted to him a fundamentalist incantation called Triple Rings of Light. Radagon then returns the favor, gifting back an incantation called Radagon's Rings of Light. These interactions show some of Miquela's positive connections with his father and also Golden Order fundamentalism. And yet, the young Miquela abandoned fundamentalism, for it could do nothing to treat Millennia's accursed rot. This was the beginning of unalloyed gold. So, what is unalloyed gold? Well, an alloy is a composition of metals, so unalloyed gold is pure gold, essentially, with no external mixtures. This gold apparently can ward away the meddling of outer gods, and so Miquela bent a lot of his efforts towards creating an unalloyed gold needle. Specifically, this needle was crafted for his sister, to ward off the rot god and forestall the effects of the incurable rotting sickness. We see the bond between the siblings as well when we visit Miquela's Halig tree. We see a statue of a one-armed woman embracing a child, Miquela. In this place, we see the biggest example of Miquela's benevolence, the Halig tree, and the society that was built into the brace that supports it. This was a promised land, seen as a salvation to many who were shunned or persecuted, provided that they can actually find the path here, of course. And like many other Empyreans, Miquela seems to have had the will within them to create a new order, and his is an order that's somewhat modelled on the ones that came before it. The biggest thing is that the Halig tree is clearly inspired by the Erd tree. But the difference is that Miquela's Halig tree is said to be accepting of all, even those the Erd tree shuns. Miquela himself was once embedded inside of the Halig tree, and he watered it with his very own blood since it was a mere sapling. Tragically, however, he was ripped out of this womb during the shattering, and his Halig tree ultimately failed to grow into an Erd tree, becoming a misshapen husk instead. But that's the story for another day. There's also a ton of cut content to do with Miquela, and he's one of the most mysterious demigods, who I'm sure we'll learn about more later. But there is one more thing that I want to mention before I go. It's kind of one theory I had during the making of this video. So, Miquela and Millennia each have their own butterflies. Millennia's is the Aeonian butterfly, which inhabit the swamp of Aeonia and are rumored to come from the wings of the rot goddess herself. And I think it's fair to say that Miquela's butterfly is the nascent butterfly, which appears as if it's just emerged from its cocoon for its entire life. This is a reference to Miquela's eternal youth and his cocoon in the Halig tree. But there is, of course, a third butterfly, right? There's the smouldering butterfly. It's said to be an eternally burning butterfly that serves as kindling. Now bear with me, but it's my theory that this butterfly is a reference to Melina, who the Blade of Calling calls the kindling maiden and the one who walks alongside flame. This might suggest that Melina is a sibling to Millennia and Miquela. Again, that's just a theory, but what I really want to talk about here is that, at the very least, Melina is almost certainly the daughter of Marika. We learned this a long time ago from looking at her name in the game's files, and we can further infer it from her dialogue, as she has a few lines that refer to mothers and one that says that she was born inside the Erd tree. So, her being the daughter of Marika is also just a theory, but this one is much more concrete than the butterfly one. Although the reason I like the butterfly theory is that it gives us a hint as to who Melina's parents might have been. Her parents would have been Radagon and Marika, which is to say Marika herself alone, I guess, because Radagon is Marika. Honestly, Melina as a character has only become more mysterious since the game was released, and I'm really only scratching the surface with this theory. But speaking of times before Elden Ring was released, back then, a long time ago, I commissioned this piece from a renowned artist named Marco, and now I'm so excited to reveal it for the first time. This storybook scene is heavily inspired by the early looks we had at Elden Ring, with a red-haired protagonist, spirit companions, a mount that looks like Yakul and a bit like Torrent, and a few other hidden details in the piece. This piece, and all of my other prints, are now available over at Spring, where you can actually buy them fully framed and ready to hang. They actually ship with a beautiful frame. The frame itself is a nice black satin finish, and you can even opt for a white border around the print, which I think looks really classy in certain cases. I think these posters are a cool way to support the channel and artists, and for you to actually get something in return that will make your room look better. So check out my prints if you're interested, but this is the end, and thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.